Well, happy Valentine's Day, niggas. We're gonna take it back to a movie called Dear John. Now, this is not really your average contemporary type of love story, but close enough. So basically, you got this guy by the name of John. He's chilling in Charleston, South Carolina. And he sees these guys and girls that are just chilling at the dock, and then this girl's persons are falling in the water. The dude Randy's about to run around to try to pick it up, but John dives in the water to go get it. She was basically saying her whole life is in that purse. Now we don't know exactly what was in it. Bottom line, he ends up giving the purse directly to her herself. By the way, the girl's name is Samantha. Savannah, my bad. So they get to talk and they kind of have a little bit of connection. But he really just chilling. He don't want to feel like a fifth wheel and whatnot. So she invites him to this little cookout thing they're going to have later on. And they get to talking some more. They chilling. Now Randy's just like asking them general questions that we find out that John's actually a special forces Green Beret. Then at the party we see this little boy named Alan. You know what I'm saying? He's very autistic or whatever. And then his father Tim comes up and then greets John. So the way they greet each other is like they've seen each other before. In fact, Tim used to be actually part of a Berets too. I guess at one point in time he was like a captain. So Alan actually talks to John, which everybody thinks is kind of weird. So Savannah explains to John that Alan doesn't really talk to nobody except family. But since Alan been around Savannah so long, I mean, he considers her family too. So afterwards, he's pretty much chilling. Then John realizes he got to get back home to his dad. He ends up walking home, but the thing is, while he's walking home, Tim drives by with Alan. He's like, hey, you want some ice cream or something? And he sees him just carrying his surfboard, so he's like, all right, just hop in. So Tim is basically supposed to be down there with his wife, but apparently he keeps saying that she's on vacation herself, so we're like, what does that mean? Basically, Tim and his wife are separated, whatever like that. But he doesn't know how to get that message across in front of Alan, so it's like... So he basically drops off John. He's like, man, look how you see it. Looking at Savannah like, man, just make sure you take care of her. I'm about to break off on your legs. But he just tried to sound it tough because that's the message he wanted her father to relay to him or whatever. So he goes in the house and you see his dad and he's basically like counting a bunch of coins. So you think to yourself, because they barely talk like that, you think to yourself John and his dad might have an estranged relationship. Now they wake up the next day and his dad makes certain meals for each day of the week. And he always ends up making like lasagna on Sunday. And you kind of get this feeling he has a little bit of autism in him too, maybe. So Savannah ends up taking John on a date, but ends up going to the spot, and he's like, I don't know about the spot. She's like, come on, I'm trying to get the food here. So he sees these dudes, he's like, hey, what's up, John? You good? John's like, come on, man, it's been like 3 years. I ain't gonna start no shit. So we think to ourselves, what did he do the last time when he was here? So Savannah and them talking and eating or whatever like that. Apparently he had some anger issues back in the day. I said back in the day like it's a couple of decades. It was only like 3 or 4 years ago. Anyway, so as they're on their little date, Savannah actually wants to meet his dad. So they go back to the house. He actually gets them talking, and he's talking about all these classic coins that he's built up over the years. So the lovebirds, everything's going all well with them. You know, they're spending more time with each other, things of that nature. So then Savannah ends up taking John to this little random spot where they're developing this house. The thing is, one time when the storm came, this random house got torn to shreds. And she's getting people together to build this whole big house up. And they're trying to make it big enough to be the size of like an orphanage. And she's basically on spring break doing manual labor to make a house for charity. It's actually kind of beautiful. So like they go in the area, they're checking out the house, they still talk, and all of a sudden it starts pouring down raining. It pretty much rains on them because the way the house is set up, it's only the wood set up. It's not even like no rooms, no roof, nothing like that. And it's the first time they get that kiss in. Then they're spending more time with each other, they holding hands and all that. Randy in the background hating. A lot of beautiful times they're having. Until everybody's on the beach, they're having this party, and all of a sudden, John scopes out Savannah all the way on the other side of the beach. And this is where we realize everybody's on like spring break or whatever. Like summer vacation and whatnot. Turns out they only got a couple more days to be with each other. Savannah's going to be going back to school, and John's going to be going back to the military. John's going to be gone for about a full year. So it gets to a point where they're talking, and then she starts bringing up things about his dad. And they get into their first real argument. It makes it feel like she was trying to diagnose his dad, thinking to himself that because they were talking about Alan and them being autistic, thinking that his dad is autistic or whatever. And, you know, that kind of sets him off a little bit. So while he's leaving, perfect time for Randy to get in his face. Randy keeps pushing him and pushing him. Eventually, John duffs the shit out of him. Like, get off my face. Somebody tried to grab him from the back and calm him down. He banged him in his nose. Turns out it was Tim. So he hit Tim by accident. So afterwards, he basically just starts walking home. Next day, he goes to Savannah's door, tries to apologize. Because they only got a couple more days before, you know what I'm saying, they got to go off and do what they got to do. He ends up apologizing to Tim when he sees him, gives Tim a letter to give to Savannah. He ends up going back to the house to eat with his dad. And he always ends up putting out 3 plates instead of 2. So we're thinking to ourselves, whatever happened to John's mom? But John reiterates he's always been with him and his dad his entire life. So we're like, where's the mom? We don't really exactly get an answer. All of a sudden, Savannah pulls up in front of the house and, you know, she apologizes for everything like that. And then she's just glad that John's, you know, they get together. And then they end up eating together. After they have themselves a nice dinner, it's time for Savannah to go to school and it's time for John to be in the military. So throughout that entire year that goes by, Savannah actually teaches Alan how to ride a horse. Yeah, he actually gets on a horse. Meanwhile, John's going through all these different types of countries he can't really say per se because he can't really tell people what he's doing. You know what I mean? But throughout that entire year, they would write notes back and forth to each other. Ergo, the title, Dear John. Because, you know, like Dear John letters. Anyway, so after a year, they finally meet back up with each other. But even before that, it's 2001. 9/11 2001. She's in school watching everybody panic on the phones and stuff like that. John ends up getting to like a little tavern and seeing the news. And we're all watching the Twin Towers get blasted on. A very critical and messed up time in history, but this is about to become important in this movie real fast. So the commander tells them, you know what I'm saying, they can go home for the weekend. If you want to re-enlist, let them know and all that good stuff, but take time to think about it. So John is finally able to see Savannah again after a year. And when they come back, they're able to, you know what I'm saying, go back to his dad. So Savannah asks John's dad about like what's his favorite coin or whatever, and he pulls out this coin. It's called a mule. Now, what exactly is a mule? It's the coin where the back of it looks like a penny, but the front of it looks like a nickel. So what's the story behind this coin? Well, back in the day, John, when he was about 7 years old, he was getting some ice cream, and he got back pennies, but one particular penny was the mule. Now, it's fun to kind of collect coins back then, but he wasn't on it like he was on it after he found out about the mule. So basically, he went to a couple pawn shops back in the day to figure out what's good with his coin. Turns out that particular coin back then was worth $4,000. He's been collecting all these random coins over the years, so you can imagine how much they're worth today. Yeah, John was born back in like 1980, so it'd have been 1987 when he got that coin. So John and his dad basically just started collecting coins, but as he got older, they both grew apart with their differences in beliefs. John was trying to be practical and his father was obsessed with coins, so much that he forgot to pay for practical things around the house. So when you see the story of how they grew apart, I don't really think his father is necessarily autistic. Not yet anyway. So basically, Savannah wants John's dad to be able to meet her parents. So his dad had fixed some meatloaf to take over there because Saturday is meatloaf day. So when they get in the car, they're driving, they're halfway there, and then his dad's like, I can't do this. He starts spazzing out. So I'm thinking to myself, he's probably never really been out the house like that unless there's to go get groceries and come back to the house. So now I'm thinking to myself, maybe his father has never really gone that far or that far away from home to be spazzing out in the car, because you think to yourself, his son has been gone away for about a damn year. What the heck was he doing by himself? Nevertheless, they end up driving him back home. And then Savannah and them end up going to their mom's house. She's like, hey, at least we tried to get him out the house. So John ends up meeting Savannah's mom. They go in the house. There's a bunch of dignitaries and people of that nature in there. Randy's in there too. He's trying to be cordial because, you know, he don't want that smoke. He got his ass whooped the last time. So then you got Savannah's father. He finally meets him. They talking and stuff like that. And they got a bunch of his friends talking around him too. Then we realize, you're doing a fine thing for your country, sir. You know what I'm saying? You got to keep this going. You know, there's going to be a bunch more tours. Now the whole 9/11 shit happened. Now, John had made a promise to Savannah that he was going to be coming home, staying home, right? But he felt like doing that and doing what's right for his country. If he does decide to re-enlist, he's going to be there for 2 years. Man, they were back and forth stressed about that 1 year. Imagine 2 years. So technically, he hasn't signed his name on the dotted line to re-enlist yet. But he basically doesn't know what to do. So he's like asking Savannah, like, yo, what should I do? So she ends up taking him out to the barn that she usually is at. And they end up making love all night. Well, apparently it'd be for the last time in a while. Because she ends up taking him back to the bus. And his father's actually there to see him off. And he's about to go back on tour for another 2 years. Now, throughout that, a lot of time has passed by. They're not really writing each other letters like they used to in the first year. Well, he's been writing letters. She hasn't really been responding like that. So it gets to one of the tours where she finally ends up writing a letter. It turns out it's been like 2 months since she's wrote one. Now, 2 months from the original time he got there, or 2 months after, like a couple more months, who knows? Pretty sure it's been a while. Bottom line, she gives him this letter that kind of breaks his heart. Turns out she really can't wait around for him forever. And on top of that, she's getting engaged. I'm like, wow. So all the letters he had saved over this point, he got pretty pissed off and just threw them in the fire. So we're pretty much thinking we got a good idea who she probably ended up getting married to, probably Randy. Boy, was I far off on that one. So I guess at this point, he'd have served for like 2 years straight at this point. And even his commander's like, look, you served your country enough, you know what I'm saying? You can go back home to your family and whatnot. Oh, I forgot a certain part before that. After he burns up the letters, they end up going on another mission. And he's trying to save his right-hand man during the mission, but he ends up getting shot. Next thing you know, he wakes up at a hospital in Germany. All right, so now we get to the part where, you know, he talks to the colonel. Colonel's like, look, man, you've done everything you could for your country. You did great. You know what I'm saying? Bottom line is I'm trying to see my family. But John basically wants to extend his stay because he's thinking to himself he don't have nothing else to go back to. He ends up staying at re-enlisted up till 2007. Yeah, so he's doing it 6 years straight. So why did it stop at 6? Apparently he had to come back home and help out his dad. So he's been in the hospital most of the time. He had a heart stroke. A couple strokes and a heart attack. I was like, geez. So he's doing his best to make sure his dad's okay, and then he comes back to the house. He's pretty much cleaning up everything. Then he ends up driving to the barn, and he ends up seeing Savannah. So the reason he even stopped by the barn and knew that Savannah was there was because she'd been trying to build up this horse camp or whatever. Turns out it only lasted for a summer. Something happened with their parents' funds, and financial situation has gone to shit within the last 6 years. I don't know how. Who knows? So basically, she brings him inside to talk, you know what I'm saying, have dinner and whatnot. He ends up looking around at the pictures in the fireplace, and we find out she actually ended up getting married to Tim. I'm like, oh shit. Tim, you took your man's girl? That's some bullshit. That's fucked up, man. So here's the situation. You're thinking to yourself, they're just in there talking. You're like, okay, where is Tim? And where is Alan at? Well, as it turns out, you know Savannah's always around Alan. So at this point, she's been taking care of him. So what's happened with Tim? Turns out Tim's got stage 4 cancer, and he's been at the hospital most of the time. So they go to visit Tim at the hospital to see Alan. Alan's gotten bigger. Now, don't get it twisted. There are many forms of autism, but the situation that Tim was in with her, and Savannah being so good at heart, and they've been around each other so much throughout the years, this was bound to happen. And she basically felt like she didn't have a choice. So bottom line, John and Savannah end up saying their goodbyes. He goes back to the hospital to check on his dad, but they don't even got a regular room no more. They got him outside in the hall. I was like, oh man. So at the beginning of the movie, John was reading this letter, talking about all he thought about was coins, and he thought about a certain somebody. So at the beginning, you think to yourself as you're watching the story, you think he's talking about Savannah, but it turns out he's actually talking about his dad. He wrote this letter for him, but his father was very incoherent to be able to read it or whatever, so he ends up reading it to him. Afterwards, his father ends up passing away at the hospital. So when he goes back to the house, he gathers up all the coins except for this one mule coin. He's keeping that coin for himself. So he ends up going back to the guy that he met at the pawn shop years ago. He tells him he can sell the coins, use them to do whatever you want to do. But I need you to donate some coins to a certain facility. So afterwards, he ends up going back on tour. We found out he's been on tour for like another 5 years. Savannah ends up writing a letter in between that time. And we found out the money went towards the hospital and Tim to keep him well enough so he can go back home and be able to spend as much time as he can with his son, Alan. And he was able to spend a whole lot of time with his son, but unfortunately, he ended up dying 2 months before she sent this letter. Last thing we seen is John just walking down the street because, he's probably on leave or finally done or whatever like that. And he's just been walking down the street. He's been riding his bike or whatever. He goes to this spot and Savannah just happens to be in his coffee shop. She ends up going outside and hugging him, and that's pretty much the end of the movie. So here are my question as to all this. Where was John's mom? Did she end up dipping off the same way Tim's wife did? Not Savannah, her wife before Savannah. Do Savannah and John ever get to be with each other? I mean, considering everything that happened and got to this point, would they even feel right being together? You can come with your own conclusions. Bottom line is, I really enjoyed this movie. Dear John, check it out.